Hello, and welcome to the next episode of It's Your Time to Shine, a podcast about being a mom in a modern world. My name is Juspreet, and today I'm talking to my friend and audio engineer, Dave Brown. Dave is a father of two adorable little girls, a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. And while our listeners have actually heard your voice before when we were talking about potty training, how's the potty training going?
Oh, boy. Really no change yet. We are so in the weeds with, work and all the other responsibilities that we're kind of, right now, it's on her. Still doing really well at the daycare, I think. And then, at times we get a little strength to kind of, encourage her. And she does well sometimes than others. It's inconsistent.
Okay, so you're putting it on the 3-year-old to become independent?
Yeah, totally. Very passive, aren't we?
That's a great, I think that's a great pep talk. Like, okay, Emmy, whenever you're ready, let us know.
Yeah. By 7 or 8, she probably will have it down.
So today we're going to talk about something we're both really share a passion for. That's music and the arts. The first thing I wanted to ask you was just if you could tell me a little bit about how you got introduced to music.
Yeah, so just for reference, I run a recording studio, and I work in all manner of audio on a daily basis, be it music production or live sound production or really anything to do with audio, voiceover, recording and reproduction, mastering. Audio and specifically music has been my life since I was a young teenager. Coming up, my family, they're all pretty musical, so that was obviously an influence for me. And then it just kind of occurred to me as maybe like 12 or 13 years old. It's like, you know what, I could be a musician if I wanted to, if I applied myself. And my mom was actually the one that suggested that I pick up a bass guitar because my brother had one. And a hand-me-down from her brother, my uncle, and it was a here, this is yours as long as you keep it, you can never sell it. It's a permanent loan type of thing to my brother. And thus it was in my brother's closet sitting there doing nothing. And so, yeah, my mom was like, hey, why don't you pick that up? And, she was also a singer in like a folk group in her church. And so her motive was we needed a bass player.
Oh, really?
For the church.
So she was grooming you at a very young age?
Exactly. She's like, he could do that. And so she brought me in to play bass. And I auditioned for the lead guitarist, band leader there. And he's like, yeah, not bad. And that was after a couple of weeks of just tinkering on my own. And he's like, do we have a little cash for some lessons, Mom? And she said, yeah, okay. So I took a few lessons. And then
did he also give you the lessons?
He didn't. No, he sent me to this other guy named Berkeley Smith who really cool session player that incidentally, I probably took lessons for maybe like 6 months from him. That's not really a long time to be taking, lessons, but I learned quite a bit, especially the technical side of things. And what's funny is it kind of came full circle where maybe 10 years after that, because he's a session player, he came into the studio I was working at, Master Sound, and I was the engineer on that particular session. And so he had kind of groomed me as like starting out as a musician, but then now I'm the guy producing his project. So it's kind of cool to see. Yeah, it had been some time since I had taken lessons.
Were you any better of a bass player when he saw you 10 years later?
Oh, yeah. I was a lot better. So concerning, broadening your kids' horizons, I feel like it's really important to just offer them exposure as much as possible to a variety of different, types of music. Looking back, I have to give some credit to my brother, Mike. He had a best friend in high school named Roland, who incidentally now he's a band director at a college down south. But it was kind of a small deal to him, I'd imagine. But he kind of on a whim had asked if I was interested in going out to see the symphony with him. And I was probably like 9 years old or something, if even that old. But I was old enough to have an interest in music, but not really know a lot about it. And so he took me out, just me and him, to the local symphony. And it was probably, I don't even recall exactly what it was. It was probably like a tribute to like scores for major films or something. Because I remember it being stuff that I would have recognized. Like, in the whole way there, he was playing soundtracks. He was playing like the Back to the Future soundtrack, Indiana
Which did people listen to back then? Like, I listen to soundtracks now, but I don't think people listened to soundtracks back then. So he must have really been like a music.
Do yourself a favor and listen to the Back to the Future soundtrack. It's good. The symphonic parts of it are just awesome. And then, all the big ones, John Williams, and, so we're listening to that stuff, and he was taking the time to kind of point out all the instrumentation and the arrangements and the parts. And it, for me, just kind of opened up this whole new world, this whole, it broadened music for me in a way.
That means like your brother's friend was 10 years older than you. You were 9 and he was 19.
That sounds
and
right.
like, I wouldn't let my kids go out with some guy who's 10 years older than them.
Well, there were different times for sure, but he was also like family. He was a musician. My brother was a musician. Like there was that bond. And with that, Roland's family was close with us, and there was a degree of trust there.
Sure.
In the same
No.
But
obviously, you turned out fine, and everything was fine.
I survived.
Yes, you survived, and we know how the story ends. But there is that aspect. Like, I would love to have someone who's much more cultured and much more advanced spend time with me or my kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like, would you do that? Would you like say, hey, I want to take Amrik to go to this concert thing and I want him to listen to this music?
Yeah, my inkling would be like, oh, we'll go. We'll all go, right?
Yeah.
No,
we'll all get
right.
tickets. Let's get... Why get 2 tickets when we can get...
Yeah, 4. Yeah.
And then half of the people will be miserable. Like your daughter and my youngest daughter will just be like under the seats playing cards or something.
And they're making us miserable because we're enjoying this. Stop it.
So that's so cool because you had someone who was like supporting you and you had that interest. My parents, like I grew up with a lot of music, not just listening to music, which was like a really fun pastime. My dad, like I said, he was a full-on audiophile. My mom really enjoyed music as well. And so I listened to lots of music, both Eastern and Western music. But my dad was in a band. And like one of my earliest memories of seeing live music was my dad up on stage. He played the accordion, which is just such a cool instrument. Being that I was in Maryland, very uncommon to see the accordion up there. And I think they had 2 accordion players, which dueling accordions is just amazing.
It's not seen very often. And I think the accordion is an underrated instrument. It's not necessarily the epitome of cool, but it has a certain energy that just gets people into the music and gets them motivated,
Totally, yeah. And you have to really be skilled to operate both your hands, in that movement. And it goes far beyond playing the keys.
Yeah.
You'll sometimes meet someone who can play the piano or the keyboard, and they can't play the accordion. But an accordion player can kill on the keys any day. Yeah. But it's also very aerobic. Like, I remember putting on my dad's accordion and trying to play it and just like trying to pump it, like the motion.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of strength.
Takes a lot of effort, yeah.
And as my dad has gotten older, he still has his accordion, and we asked him to break it out, and he played a song or 2, and he was really good. And then he was like, oh, I'm out of breath because, it takes a lot of effort,
too.
Yeah,
you're not doing it every day, too.
Yeah.
Just like running, you can't run 10 miles if you take 6 months off like I tend to do.
Exactly. But the cool thing is, like, my dad was in this band, and there was, like, it would be like a 20-piece band, and everyone would just come up, and they'd rent out these elementary schools, and, they would do these shows, but it was just, like, for their friends and family. I don't remember them charging tickets or anything, but they would go and practice, and then we would go see them every Friday or Saturday night at this elementary school. But we'd just be there running around, and I just remember just staring up at them. And one of the bands that my dad was in, which was called Perdes, which means you're in a foreign country. So they were all from India, right? So for them, it was like the foreign country. And the lead singer had such a beautiful voice. They did their own music, and she had this song where she started out singing before the band joined in.
Oh, yeah.
And her angelic voice, I was like just mesmerized by. And so I like used to stare at her all the time, and she was like really beautiful. And eventually I got to know her because she would, hang out and come to our house. She wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
She was like pretty self-centered. And I was like,
no.
That ruined that for me.
Don't meet your heroes, people.
Yes. And so I think that I probably pivoted fairly quickly to like, I'm going to focus on Western music for a little while. And my brother convinced my mom to buy 2 AC/DC records from like the local department store, like the Woolworth. And I remember we were checking out, and the cashier says to my mom, "Are you going to let your son listen to this?" And my mom said, yes. And she said, "How old is he?" And he was in 2nd grade.
Oh, awesome.
I was in kindergarten, and my mom said, "Yeah, is there anything wrong with it?" Because one of the AC/DC albums, I think it was Dirty Deeds, had like the eyes were blacked out, like as if the eyes were being censored.
Right.
And my mom, I remember standing in the line at the store, and she turned to my brother and said, is this bad? And my brother said, no, it's totally fine.
Totally fine.
And then she said, okay. And she, paid the $4 or $5 for it. And we took those records home and my brother still has them.
Yeah. That was great music.
Yeah, it was definitely solid. But I look back on some of that stuff, like access to music was different back then.
Massively different. Yeah. I kind of miss all of that. Like when there was actually some effort and to go out and acquire, and you brought it home. You're so proud. Like, I just checked this out, and you got something physically in your hands, and it had a feel and a smell, and like I just love the way the print, the smell, the jacket smelled, and all that. Yeah. Now it's just like it's almost no fun because you can just go and type in a word and like, okay, there's the next thing I'm going to listen to, I guess. I'm not that excited about it.
Yeah. And I think like we would listen to, our friends would have one album and then we'd say like, don't get that one because I'm going to get that one. So you get the other one. Yeah. And you all get together. And we had a lot of tapes and CDs, not as many records because of my dad's nobody can touch the record player rule.
Off limits.
But I think about how CDs and cassette tapes like really revolutionized children's access because things got cheaper and production was cheaper.
Yeah.
And your band just released a record, right? You actually sent it to the printing press, which is like kind of a retro
pretty monumental
idea
for me. I've never released a vinyl. And what's funny is that, I've been producing music for 20, I don't know how many, I don't want to age myself, but it's been a while. So this is the first time I've ever had to consider the mechanical limitations of reproducing music off of vinyl with a needle. And so, I've never really had those parameters, and it kind of opened up my eyes in regards to like, okay, song order selection on these classic albums, there's a reason why they put like their super high energy songs at the front, and then it would sort of trail off in energy as it went back, and then you get to the B-side and it would kind of do the same thing all over again. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, balancing time and all that. Like now it's just whatever order you want, just throw it in there. There's no limitations.
or now, like for those of us who are on Spotify and we don't pay for individual tracks. Yeah. It's shuffle play. We don't even know what order things come on the album anymore.
What is an album?
Yeah, exactly. But I think like some of the drawbacks I think about for my kids, because I try to expose them to music. And whenever I play music for them, it usually starts with, oh my gosh, you guys, you have to hear this, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'll play something for them. And then I'm looking at them for their reaction. Mm-hmm. Like, are they going to say, oh, I love it. I want to play it again. Who is this person? Are they like, okay, can we go back to, listening to DJ Khaled or whatever they want to listen to?
And so my experience with that has been the more I want my kids to appreciate something, I find the less they do. the more effort I put into it, like they can smell fear. They're like, I'm afraid that they're not going to like this or something. Yeah, and so, and then my oldest is 8. And so I've numerous times tried to play songs that are, were like groundbreaking for the time and maybe had a big influence, not just on me, but on music as a whole. So case in point, a couple weeks ago, we were in the studio and I just installed a new subwoofer, and I'm going through my catalog of like all these great songs to kind of hear how it translates. And I got to Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight. Like,
oh, a classic.
That was such a groundbreaking song. Like the gated snare drum that basically defined the entire decade after that. Yeah.
And that's what you play when you have like a brand new full range set of speakers and you want to listen to everything, right?
Dynamic range. Just let's see how quiet we can go, how just pristinely quiet to how raucously loud we can get within a matter of 1 or 2 minutes.
Right.
And so played the whole song for her, and she just looked at her phone the whole time. And I'm like, come on, like, give me something. Like, this is a really emotive song. This is giving you a lot. You're giving it nothing back. And she just gives me this straight face and then gives me the thumbs down. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
And she did the same thing some months earlier when I played Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I've decided that, or I've discovered that if I just play music around her with no expectations, she'll come to it on her own. It's kind of like putting, a bowl of milk out for the cat. Like, you can't force it on the cat, but if you just leave it out there,
they'll eventually wander by. Yeah. That's funny. I think she might be a little rebellious. I wonder where she gets that from.
I couldn't imagine.
When I think about Spotify and other content, it's different. Like I used to sit in my room, listen to the radio, and then when a song came on that I really liked, I'd have my tape player like all queued up and ready.
Oh, yeah.
It was like the original mixtapes, not like recording it off of your records, but actually recording off the radio. And we used to recognize music like within the first two
Oh yeah, you had to
notes,
pick it up.
right?
So you could, yeah, and or if they gave you the benefit of announcing they're going to play it, of course he's still talking over the intro, and then he cuts off the ending early. Darn DJ.
and like the whole like notion of DJs has kind of gone away, right?
Yeah.
Because they have them on some channels and some shows, but they're basically just playing a predetermined list of music that has to do with like marketing and other things. And so like I tell my kids, like, how are you going to expand your horizons and listen to things, outside the norm? And what I found with my kids, like I'll play stuff for them. The cool thing is that since we all share this family Spotify account and we can share like our playlist with each other, sometimes they will come back and say, oh, Mom, you played this, like I heard you listen to Snoop the other day and I started listening to it. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I don't know if I want you listening to Gin and Juice right now.
I don't know how many of those songs we partied to in my day.
Yes, and they're all explicit. So
Very explicit, yeah.
So I've been trying to expose them to different music. And like you mentioned, Bohemian Rhapsody, one of the things that I did is I had played it for Enrique about a year ago and he liked it. And I don't play music and say like, oh, you play, like I'll play something, you'll play something. I'm like not that nice of a mom, mostly like I'm listening to this. And then if they want to listen to something, I'm like, okay, you can play one song. And then we're going to go back to my music.
Back to me.
Yeah, we're going to go back to my music. But I heard Enrique trying to play Bohemian Rhapsody on his violin.
Oh.
Which is pretty complex work. And the composition of Bohemian Rhapsody is just so wonderful. I just love all of the different themes and listening to him play that and appreciate, on the violin, how the scale changes and
That's
then
ambitious.
The beat changes.
I appreciate that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But even with all that, if I tell him, oh, you're doing great, play more. Yeah. Just like your daughter.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go see what the dog's doing outside.
Yeah, you can't push it too hard, and I've seen growing up. I've been surrounded by musicians all my life and their kids, and I see more often than not the children of musicians kind of have to come to it on their own. Like when dad's a good musician but pushes it on their kids, they just reject it wholeheartedly. So I've been trying to cautiously influence my tastes on them, but. Looking back, I have to give my mom a lot of credit because looking back at how I came up, she never pushed the music that I appreciate of hers on me. I came to it on my own, but at the same time, she was very accepting of what I wanted to play, which she probably wasn't very interested in it at first. But, she and I used to drive around Virginia Beach, running errands and all this stuff together, and we would sing Eagles and the Beatles, and like that was a really good education for me. I didn't realize at the time I was learning how to pick out harmonies and learning a lot about songwriting just by listening. But she was also very accepting of the more modern music that I would listen to. She grew an appreciation for it, and it's something that she would never have been drawn to. But by in contrast to you, like you'll get like one song and then we're back to me kind of thing. Like I find myself doing exactly the same thing. But looking back, I should probably be more like my mom.
Are you saying that I'm like a mean mom?
I'm saying I am.
We already know that I am, so it's okay. No, that's a good point. I listen to a lot of I listen to a lot of pop music also. Like you've heard some
I've
of
heard
the
your
stuff.
Taste. It's
pretty
modern.
varied. Yeah, I do listen to some music and I'm like, this is garbage.
It's still got to be good, right?
This is noise, and it's like synthesized and all this other stuff. And but the kids they like what's in, and it's not always about the music. Sometimes it's about the personalities, and I think that's how music has changed a lot. The same way that I am anti-R. Kelly now because of his bizarre lifestyle choices. Even though he had some great hits back in the day, I'm like, no, I'm not going to listen to those anymore. The kids do the opposite. They have these personalities they latch onto, and they think they're amazing. And then any song that Ariana Grande puts out, Bhavneet's like, I love this song. I'm like, have you heard it yet? Have you listened to the words, And like we grew up opening up the CD jacket and then like reading all the words and like getting the backstory right on like what the music was about. And so I think that has changed. I think marketing and personality has really changed music quite a bit. And I'm not saying that there's not really great music out there, but how do you find it? How are you exposed to it? It's not the ways that it was when we were growing up, which was having like a really great music teacher, a really great band instructor fostered that relationship of children and music.
Yeah. We talked about that the other day about how, you were in the band, and then I grew up with siblings that, they were in marching band in high school, and the band director was almost like part of the family. He was a huge influence on my siblings and even myself. He's just one of those guys that he didn't just teach you how to do music. He taught you how to do life,
Yeah.
And so that was, but yeah, I don't see that as much these days.
Definitely not in public school here in Texas. I wonder if it's different in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
My kids don't even have playing an instrument, or like Bhavneet, as you know, is like just loves singing. And yet she was in the choir at high school and she hated it. She was like,
really?
I hate the class. It's terrible. They don't teach us anything. They're just yelling at us. And like it isn't fostering that like deep love for music. In fact, I think it's making it worse, or she doesn't want to do anything related to music. And and like I've said before, like I really view my role as a parent to be one of like stretching the kids.
Right.
And like moving them beyond
out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly. Out of their comfort zone and pushing them beyond.
Yeah.
You've heard me say before, like most of life is not dreaming big enough, right?
Right, yeah.
And so how do you do that when there isn't the infrastructure and the support? Because music is just not valued the same way.
No, it's not. It's not, used to be music was a way that we entertained ourselves as a group, and now it's like we can just flip on a TV or pull up a podcast or something and entertain yourselves with somebody else's music or content individually. But sitting down and creating music together seems like that's something that I remember doing at the end of parties when I was younger. Inevitably somebody would bring a guitar and we all sit down and just start plucking through our favorite songs, and it was a lot of fun. But that doesn't really seem to happen, at least not in my family anymore. We need to change that.
I know. Yes. Oh my gosh, you're totally right. That's like the Punjabi family's dream. We would always sit around and everyone's going to bring their instruments.
Right.
And just similar to the Sikh tradition, a lot of Punjabi families would just sit on the floor so everyone can fit in a room.
Right.
And you have all your instruments, and all the instruments sit on the floor too. Mm-hmm. And they would sing songs and we'd all sing along.
Cool.
There were some people that were like, had wonderful voices, and there's some people that were like super skilled with instruments. And there's some people that were like not that good, but they still, it was
a group. Who
it
cares?
didn't have to be perfect. And now I think, or if my kids want to do something, I'm like, well, first let me get you lessons, right? Yeah. And like get you ready. And you're right. We do need to change that. We need to just make it a common practice.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of the TED Talk that what's his name, the bass player for Bella Fleck and the Flecktones, Victor Wooten. So, incidentally, Victor and his brothers, Victor was like the session bass player at Master Sound for years, and he's just one of those guys that would come in and he would do exactly what he was asked, and he'd do it perfectly, just uncanny how good he was. And nobody knew just how amazing he actually was until he started later playing with Bella Fleck and the Flecktones. We're like, this guy's been doing this. He's been able to do this entire time. We didn't know. But anyway, the TED Talk that he had done was about music, growing up in a family of musicians, and they really treated music as a language. So that idea of like being ready to perform with everybody, that was very much the opposite. They basically put a guitar in his hand way before he was capable of even conceiving of the concept of rhythms or things like that, and just had him, quote unquote, jamming with the band.
Oh, wow.
And he drew a parallel that I guess most, I hadn't thought about before I saw this talk, which was that music is a language. And when you are learning a language, you're not segregated from the pros. You're encouraged to participate with, the elders, the people who have mastered the language. And so you're jamming with the band from the beginning. And so you're learning from them and they're learning from you. And they're actually, a lot of times the adults are adapting the way they speak. They start baby talking, Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a cool, encouraging way for you to learn language. Well, you can do the same thing with music. I thought that was really enlightening.
And the idea of music being a language is like such a beautiful sentiment to me. Like I that's really resonated with me. And it's kind of making me think about other things, like how we interact with one another as a family, how we interact with one another as a community. And if music is this language of love, if I can make that stretch there, where we're able to communicate, and it can have this like a profound ability to connect with folks that we may not be able to speak with in our traditional languages, whether that's English or Punjabi or Spanish, whatever your language is. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that, because I think there are opportunities for us as a community to develop relationships where music might be the basis of it, or maybe even reinforce the relationships that we already have.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's sort of like though it's a universal language, I keep saying that, everybody understands music. You understand it, you can't necessarily speak it, but it has its dialects, it has, its cultural heritage. So it's kind of cool that you can pass down, music from your ancestry to your kids, and then other people get it, and I find it's really interesting when you get crossover where you can, I'm from this culture, you're from that culture, and then that musically melds to where now you've got this new sort of like hybrid dialect, if you will.
But the other part of it is that by sharing something that resonates deeply with me and that I connect with, sharing it with someone else, I'm affording that opportunity to like get a little bit of a window into how I feel. And that's shaped by my experiences.
Yeah, this is the mixtape scenario. It's like you made that mixtape for that special someone, and you're hoping that they gleam the sentiment out of every hidden lyric in there. But there's something also, just like you have this whole wave of people that insist that vinyl sounds better. I mean, to be honest, no, it doesn't. It sounds different, and it has its own charming qualities, and tape does too, like the wow and flutter of a tape deck. Like, I never realized when I was young that I was not hearing it the way it was supposed to be, but there's something about it that even though it was wrong, it was right.
With a tape. Okay, yeah. Well, I think that vinyl sounds better, not because the sound quality is better, but there's nostalgia to static.
That's what I mean.
And that's endearing. It evokes a certain feeling.
That's the charm of it.
Yeah, that's the charm of it. Let's dive deeper into this idea of music as language and the emotions that are tied to it. So I'll give a personal example. The feeling that I get, and I had this when I was a kid, so there's nostalgia and sentimentality attached to it, but I still get it when a record is about to start playing.
That anticipation. What is coming? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a heightened sense of anything is possible.
Yeah.
And I think like that's what music can be, right? It can be those moments of silence, and that's music.
Yeah, and in music, I've grown a fondness for space, for the patience that it takes, and as a producer, songwriter, to allow space, because, what's that old jazz saying? It's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't. Allowing space so that it allows the listener to like anticipate what's coming up, because I feel like whatever's coming up, be it big or small, it seems to have a bigger payoff.
And it's different every time, but you still know it's like a universal language for it's about to start.
Something great's about to happen.
Yeah. And that idea of space in music, from a composition perspective, it's so important to have not only the right instrument and the right notes in the right place, but you need the right measure to bring about certain feelings. And I think the same thing is true in life. But this idea and this concept of space, even in our lives and in our daily routines, I'm becoming extremely aware of how little space I have. I think that there's an opportunity to kind of learn from music and to learn from some of the great artists that have said there is value in just like doing nothing and letting the music speak to you or letting your craft speak to you.
Yeah. I saw a documentary called Glass. It's a documentary following the life of Philip Glass, the composer. And one of the things that he had said that struck me, I thought it was kind of fascinating, was his perspective on music was he envisions music like a river underground. It's always there, but not everybody's listening for it. You have to take the time to just kind of slow down, stop, and just listen and let it flow. And I feel like that's sort of an analogy for life, because I think so many people are trying to force it. They're so worried about what's the next thing I should do, and packing all this time. But I think a lot of times it's slow down, just calm down, listen, and let yourself settle, and it will come to you. You don't have to really force it.
Do you ever sit down and compose music?
I do. I'm actually very bad about the things that roll around in my head. Like, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have a symphony going, and I'm like, I've got X amount of things to do today. So it's putting that idea down, capturing it is the hardest part for me. But yeah, I do compose, and I find me in particular, I do best crafting other people's, when I say they generate the pulp and I'll shape it, that seems to be my gift.
I had someone once tell me that your greatest gift is that you enable others to get things done. And so like a lot of times it'll be someone else's idea, and I don't have that pride of ownership, which is why I'm not competitive. And sometimes I wish that I could be that way and that I was that way. But you can't change the nature of who you are. You know, I'm just as happy helping someone else get their project done and then feeling good about that little hidden piece that I put into it.
It's very rewarding, both from, you know, having a tangible, like, oh wow, look at what we've created, but also it forges a relationship and a trust that has a level of intimacy too. There's something really cool about that.
So when you listen to music that you've produced or edited, do you feel like there's a part of you in it?
Yeah, absolutely. And people may not pick up on it, but I know it's there. And there's also a sense of frustration because I look back and stuff I did last week, I'm like, oh, I could do that better, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the sign of someone who's always perfecting their craft.
Yeah. That's how we get better. And you have to love that isn't quite perfect. You know, you're a better version of yourself every day, hopefully. I
think I've been learning to embrace those past creative things just the way that they are, and just to kind of leave them the way that they are. And so I think there's something beautiful in having like a snapshot in time that kind of says like, this is who Juspreet was when she wrote this thing, or this is who Dave was when he produced this song. Yeah,
I love that. And so since my focus is recording, that's kind of the way I view it too, is we're just capturing a moment. And however perfect or imperfect it is, it's real.
This has been so great just talking about music and art. And I just love hearing life stories. Like, you know me, I'm just wanting to listen to people's like unique experiences and understanding like how things have shaped their lives.
You're really good at that.
I wish I could go back and study a social science and then become an anthropologist or something, because although I probably would make $0 and 0 cents a year.
Yeah, is there money in that?
I think it's fascinating to understand how we all interact and how we bring our experiences to everything that we see and feel and do, and how we even perceive our relationship with others. Mm-hmm. And so this idea that music is a part of you, it's something that's inside. What you said about that composer, Philip Glass, saying it's like a river that runs underneath us. Yeah. You know, this, in my mind, there's poetry to that. Yeah. Because I'm thinking about like how people, you know, how humans settle around rivers and how we dig for water and how water is life. And so it really feels like we're coming kind of full circle to why I toil with the fact that music is so important, and I want to make it central in not just, you know, my kids' life and my own life, but also to make it central to the message that we're sending and how we interact with one another. So I was really inspired by what you said earlier about making time to just sit around and create music. And I don't think we need, like, we're talking about music today because we both share a passion for it, but probably doesn't need to be music. It could probably be like painting and poetry and reading. You know, it could be any of those things, like sitting around and reading passages out of books that we love or poems that we love. And it sounds kind of cultish, you know, that this idea that we'd sit with our kids around a campfire and just create music, but it also sounds really wonderful. And so I'm like really inspired to do that. I'm going to definitely do it. Maybe I'll make a short video and share it with everyone.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
And then so I wanted to close out by asking you, when you look over your life and you think about the future, what do you think about the way that music and musicians are treated in society?
Well, I do feel pretty strongly that musicians are undervalued monetarily. You know, these days, of course, more than ever, musicians, they don't make money from their efforts, especially in terms of, you know, people don't pay for music like they used to. We used to go out and we'd spend $15 to have an album. Now it's like $10 a month and you're downloading hundreds of albums a month potentially. So it's a little frustrating from a musical standpoint that it's like, it seems like we're working as hard or harder than ever, but not being rewarded for it, which makes the struggle even more difficult. But as far as the value on, you know, in people's lives, I don't think that's diminished in any way, to have music that moves and inspires. Yeah, we're going through some tough times right now, and it's interesting to see how things are shaking out and how they will change in the long term. But more than anything, I think inspiring our kids to appreciate, and just whether music becomes a thing for them as into adulthood, or whether it's just something that helps shape them as a person. Music has proven over and over again to be super valuable at forming great adults.
Well said. And with that, as always, thanks for listening.